Joining us in Singapore, James Dorsey, Adjunct Senior Fellow on Middle East with the Singapore's S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies. In Beijing, Wang Jin, Associate Professor with Northwest University of China. Gentlemen, good to see both of you. Now, the latest development, according to CNN reports, military leaders from Israel have been suggesting that military actions have, quote-unquote, achieved its purpose. Now it's next to the political leaders for discussion and negotiations. What is your take on this piece of news? James.
I think what underlies that statement by the Israeli military is an assumption that may be mistaken, that the severe blows that both Hamas and Hezbollah have suffered have brought them to the point where they were going to be more submissive and more flexible in terms of meeting Israeli demands for an end to the fighting. The situation on the ground doesn't necessarily prove that. You see that in Lebanon with the continued Hezbollah's continued ability to fire rockets at Israel, its continued ability to confront Israeli ground troops, and even in Gaza, where the damage to Hamas is far more extensive. But even so, every time the Israelis withdraw from an area, Hamas is able to regroup and re-enter.
Professor Wang, from your perspective,
I think it's maybe a good news because actually it suggests that Israelis realizes that they are facing the very valuable opportunity or very important time to seek the peaceful opportunity. Because we know that Israel's war in the Gaza Strip and also the Israeli ongoing war in the southern Lebanon, I think Israeli, their elites, especially their military and leaderships, they clearly know that it should be to some certain point to turn the military so-called victories into the political gains in the future to secure Israel's northern frontier with Lebanon. But I mean, we cannot be so positive about the future of the peace because there was still very big division, the trust division between Israeli society towards the Lebanese government and also Lebanese Hezbollah. So it's a time that Israel want to make some concessions and maybe they want to approach the stances of Lebanese, but it's still far away.
We have seen the neighboring countries taking certain stances, both condemning the attacks against civilians, but at the same time, not necessarily visible in terms of creating clear mechanism for either negotiation or a possibility to put an end to the conflict. Why is that, James? You've been doing research about the Middle East for almost 5 decades, shall I say, unfortunately. What is your take about this round of conflicts and the regional players' role in this regard?
Different regional players have different interests. So if we look first and foremost at the Arab countries, Egypt and Jordan, the 2 countries with peace treaties with Israel, also border Israel. Jordan has a significant Palestinian population. So therefore, the concerns of the Egyptians and the Jordanians, particularly with the Israeli government that may consider expelling Palestinians, as Israel has done in the past, has very different concerns than, for example, the Gulf states, most of which, with some exceptions, but primarily if one looks at Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, are not fans of either Hezbollah or Hamas, and therefore, on the one hand, may be horrified by the carnage, the human carnage that this war is sparking, but at the other hand, would like to see Israel defeat Hamas, Israel defeat Hezbollah, and in the process weaken Iran.
Well, at the same time, another player, the United States, certainly is having a bigger than all the others role in the region and on the latest conflicts. What is your take on that, James?
The United States clearly is the one power that has, at least in theory, leverage over the United States, over Israel. The assumption being that because it is the major arms supplier, because it is a major financial supporter of Israel and gives Israel diplomatic protection, that it has influence. How much influence it has remains to be seen, because influence is a two-way road. It's influence that you have because of your assets, but I have to be willing to accept that influence, or willing to pay the price if I don't do what you are advising me. And that hasn't been put to the test, or at least not fully.
Mr. Wang, of course, things are very complicated right now. The U.S. has an election, results of which hopefully will be revealed to the rest of the world soon, on time. But at the same time, we also see the Israel-Iran interaction over the past few weeks. Meanwhile, we see different factions in the Middle East as a result of the strikes by Israel have been gaining and losing their military capabilities or attacking capabilities. So how do you see the fluid situation as we speak?
I think the situation become more fragile, and also existing both the war-prone chances as well as the peaceful chances. Because we know, as you mentioned, there are different factions, and also the war still continues while the rivalry and tension is still ongoing between Israelis and Iranians. And meanwhile, no direct or no reliable communication channels has been established. Especially, we noticed that the United States is trying to get rid of the responsibilities and original political responsibility and the humanitarian responsibility that the United States should take. So that is why a lot of uncertainties emerge. A lot of the chances for war might emerge, as well as the chances for the peace will emerge.
What about China? I mean, and others. We see at the BRICS Plus meeting, which wrapped up in Kazan, 7 hours of remarks made by leaders and international organization executives. Almost everyone touched on the conflict in the Middle East and calling for peace. Now, how would those voices count in terms of international communities' rallied voices for peace? How will those voices be translated into actions, both by those in conflict and by those who are trying to create peace?
I think you are right, because the BRICS summit is a very major international platform for expressing international voices over the ongoing war in the Middle East. Because if we remember that last November, when the latest round of Israeli and Palestinian war just erupted, the BRICS may be the very first international organization that held the very special summit over the Israeli-Palestinian war. So our President Xi Jinping also expressed the very Chinese stances over the ongoing war, calling for peace, starting the humanitarian assistance, and also offer the new channels for communication. So that is why, on the one hand, the BRICS and other international the mechanism, their voices represent the common, the co-shared voices or co-shared willingness for the international community to help pacify the tension, to express a kind of the willingness not to exaggerate or not to upgrade the war in the Gaza Strip and also in the southern Lebanon. And on the other hand, that maybe some concrete steps will be taken under the encouragement from this international community. So that is why I think it is a very positive message transferred, but it's still not enough. Much more should be done.
James Dorsey, Wang Jin, thank you so much for joining us.